Okay, so this video I wanted to show how to cut down paper from the Hosho or Mulberry paper, the Japanese rolls of papers, usually made for calligraphy, but will work perfectly fine for relief printing. So here I am uh, going ahead and using the cutting mat, the I think 11 by 17 or so cutting mat, or 12 by 18 cutting mat. And so this paper is about 11 inches wide, so I am measuring 8.5 inches on the top and the bottom because I want to make sure that this um, is straight and as square as possible. So I'm unrolling it a little bit, and I flipped the ruler upside down, which makes it a little bit easier to tear if you have a cork back ruler. And so picking up from the top right, I gently kind of pull it and tug it at the same time folding down that ruler. And now I am unfurling it and setting it under the mat just temporarily to weigh it down. But careful that you don't end up like bending it because you can't remove um, like a crease. So just be gentle when you put it under something to weigh it down a little bit. So here I am. I'm just going to show it one more time. Just going through measuring 8.5 inches, using the grid of the cutting mat to make sure it's square. So I adjust and line it up with the edges. And so here, watch as I pull towards myself. I don't pull over the ruler. I kind of pull straight up and back. And of course, it's opposite if you are left-handed. And so here, I think I'm going to just grab the other paper and stick it with it. Um, and I'm kind of putting it under so that it uh, curls side down, which might not particularly matter, but just be careful. You can't see what I'm doing. Just make sure you don't crease it. So I think here's the next one. I'm just going through, I'm speeding through because you've seen just measuring 8.5 by 11. So do this every time to ensure that you have the same size paper. But this time I'm going to show a different method. And this is called the water tear method. And this method will, instead of having like a straight torn edge, will give you a nice feathery edge. This usually only works for these kind of Japanese papers with like the laid lines from the molded decal. Now, something that I learned after I filmed this is that it's way easier to use if you have something called a bone folder or scoring tool, or if you dip, say, like the back of a butter knife or a spoon handle or something, if it's metal and water, and just drag a solid object across gently. And in here I kind of held it down with a ruler, but this technique does not need a ruler necessarily. You can just gently from the top tear it apart. So I'm trying this again one more time to try it without the ruler, and mixed results, I would say. So I think just using a simple bone folder is way easier. This time I finally figured out it's so much easier possibly to use some object lightweight that won't mark the paper to hold it down so it doesn't keep curling. So this time I only just kind of did a couple brush strokes, but as you can see, it's a little uneven. So that's why something like a hard tool that's not also absorbing so much water, but just enough to transfer. So here, starting from the top, just you can kind of tell I'm inching down as I go to tear the paper apart. And partway through, I decided that big area it is really hard to cut a straight line there. But for the most part, it still follows that line that I marcated with the brush stroke in the water. Now here, I will recommend that if you ever need to tear a strip of paper, usually if it's smaller than an inch, it's pretty difficult. So you can just freehand tear something, like if your edge wasn't straight the last time you used the roll, you can go ahead and just tear it inch by inch, holding down that ruler so it doesn't slip. And the reason I use I flip it over is that I want the metal to be flush to the ground. Like sometimes there's like a little bit of a gap otherwise. So this one is the X-Acto knife. And this, I don't just cut it straight down. So pay attention to what I do. I leave a small smidge of a gap at the top when I go to cut. Because sometimes with this type of paper, it's sort of delicate, so sometimes it'll just like bunch up at the top. So I start a little bit in and then I rotate the handle and then I do one last cut away from me, which is not a very natural movement, but it usually does the trick and looks okay. So thank you. So that's 3 ways to cut the paper. So that's 3 ways to cut Japanese paper.